Our regular reading for today was going to be from Luke chapter 9, and so let's still use that reading. Luke 9, verses 10 to 17. This is what it says. When the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. Then he took them with him, and they withdrew by themselves to a town called Bethsaida. But the crowds learned about it and followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God and healed those who needed healing. Late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away so that they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we're in a remote place here." He replied, "You give them something to eat." They answered, "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Unless we go and buy food for all this crowd." About 5,000 men were there. But he said to his disciples, "Make them sit down in groups of about 50 each." The disciples did so, and everybody sat down, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples to set before the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. Oh, it's one of our favourite stories about Jesus, isn't it? It's one of those few stories actually that occurs in all 4 Gospels. It really must have made a great impact on the disciples, and no great surprise. All they had was just a few little barley loaves and a few fish, and yet thousands of people were fed that day. We don't know exactly how many. It mentions 5,000 men. Remember, there were women and children as well as that. So several thousand people all got fed, and with some left over at the end. Well, that's a great story. But you know, it's more than just a great story. It comes down to us now as a reminder that God provides. But he often does it through us. Jesus said to his disciples, "You feed them." And they didn't know how. So he had to take over and show them. It all starts with this little offer. We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. We're told in John's Gospel that was actually provided by a little boy who happened to be there. One of those few in that great crowd who still had some food with him for some reason. He must have brought surplus along. He probably overheard them talking about food and how will everyone get fed. And he just came up to Andrew and said, "Look, will this help?" That's how Jesus often starts. He says, "What have you got? And let's work with that." You know, when I was at school, it was the thing at that time for people to take the Bible apart, as it were, and try to explain the miracles in particular. I always remember the religious studies teacher we had at that time, a Reverend Slater, I remember him well. And he had cottoned on to this way of doing things well and truly. When it came to the feeding of the 5,000, he said, "Look, it's obvious. Everyone really did have their food, but it was hidden away. And when others started to bring out what they had and share it, they were shamed into sharing what they had too. Everyone shared. And then they realised there was enough for everyone. That's not the story that's written in the Bible. You really have to change the story quite a lot to make that fit. These were thousands of people who'd followed Jesus and his disciples into a remote place. They'd been there all day. Whatever picnic or whatever they'd brought with them had been consumed long ago. It's very clear that there was very little left. Jesus had to do a miracle, a real miracle. And so he took these 5 loaves of bread, these 2 fishes. He just gave thanks, he broke them, and he kept on breaking them and handing out the pieces, and it just kept coming. You know, for the one who created the universe, that is not a difficult thing to do. But how does that relate to us here and now in this particular situation? Well, we look around us and we see that we're in the midst of an emergency, a health alert, coronavirus in every item on the news, and panic beginning to rise. And people saying, what can we do? What can we do? And Jesus comes back and he says, well, what have you got? That's what you can offer. Maybe you've got spare time. Maybe you're in contact with various people. So you can go out and you can get in contact with those people and make sure that they're all right. Just reaching across the divide like that helps people to get through all this isolation. Maybe you're one of those who just says, I can't do anything, I'm stuck at home. All I can do is pray. Like that's a last resort. It's not, it's a first resort. It's a hugely important thing that we have, that we can do. Maybe you've got things that you can share with other people. Whatever it is. Jesus says, what have you got? And then he invites us to offer it up to him. You notice the story. It wasn't that those 5 loaves and 2 fishes were just handed out and people hoped for the best. No, they were given to Jesus. And in Jesus's hands, they became much more than they were. It's the same today. With whatever we have to offer, even if we think it's laughably small, we put it into Jesus's hands and we ask him to bless it. And in his hands, it becomes something much bigger, something much more powerful. That's when the miracle happens. This is not a human thing. This is the power of God. We've got a song to listen to next. Well, in fact, let's not just listen to it. Why don't we sing along? If we'd all been together in the church today, this is one of the songs that I think we'd probably have been singing. Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. Let's listen, continue to listen to that voice that Jesus uses to call us and to put us to work for him in various different ways. And let's respond. So sing along to this next song and make it your prayer. Here I am, Lord. I'll work for you.